5 scores! Rick 5.
We've decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick 5, Gary Madden.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 79 of the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan. Joining me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vibe. Squid, how are we creeping? You get from under that snow the last couple of days you got crushed with?
Oh, my goodness, Mike. It was I got to tell you, it was probably about 2.5 feet of snow. It was crazy. And then the snow banks after the plows went by are probably about 4 feet high. But it'll disappear before long. You never know.
Like the old days, just like the old days growing up. Well, our guest today, we got a special guest today, somebody you played with in Buffalo. He was drafted by the Sabres in 1988, spent 14 of his 16 years with them, known for his tough play, fan favorite, has a rule named after him. That's something you don't have, Squid. He's written a book called Razor's Edge, works for the Sabres on radio broadcasts. Please welcome Rob Ray. Rob, first off, thanks for joining us, and how you keeping? Did you guys get hit with the snow too that we got in Toronto?
Yeah, we got bombarded with the snow, and actually today it's 40 degrees here. It's melting like crazy, and it's flooding everywhere. So, it's created two problems in the last week that everybody has to deal with. But hey, we expect it here. You get it once a year, maybe twice, and it keeps you honest.
Yeah, you get hit pretty hard there in Buffalo. We usually don't. It usually kind of goes like this around us. But this time we got about 2.5 feet, so we got quite a bit. And I was shoveling the other day, and for about 3 hours it took me to shovel out just the bottom of the driveway after the plow went by. So anyway,
you weren't so cheap you could hire somebody to do that for you.
Well, I don't have any work, Rob. Oh. Not here in Canada.
Now, speaking of work, Rob, how are you keeping yourself busy these days?
We're busy doing the games, do the color with RJ and Danny Dunleavy there. We do every game, whether it's radio or TV. And so that keeps you on your toes. My kids are young still. I got a 12-year-old boy that is deep into hockey, and so you're always on the road going somewhere every weekend and practicing 4 or 5 times a week. So there's really not much downtime. When you're not at the rink, you're at another rink somewhere in town or somewhere in the country. Now,
is the city a buzz right now with the Bills obviously moving on to play KC this weekend? Are you caught up on that too?
No, I'm not. I enjoy football and I enjoy seeing them do well. Yep. I'm not a diehard fan like majority of the people in this town are, but it's a buzz right now. I'll tell you, they're going nuts, and they've been going nuts all season long, and it's justified. They're doing really well, and it's great to see the interest. And for us, it's until the Bills are done, they don't even know the Sabres are playing. So we've got a couple more weeks here, hopefully, that we can kind of go under the radar and then be ready to go once the Bills are done. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And you know what it is? My son's at the age now where he likes football. He's into trading cards and all that. So he knows all the players. So you sit and watch the games and he's telling me all about this guy. This guy did this. This guy's got that. Yeah. And it's amazing. And I think it's fantastic. It was kind of the trading card was an avenue to gain interest in the game. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's great too. My sons are so old that they tell me what to do. They don't even talk about trading cards or anything anymore. They're 36 and 32.
She's 17, and she pretty much runs my show. There's 2 people in this world I'm afraid of. My daughter and my sister are the only 2.
I don't blame you.
Well, I've got a 30-year-old and a 27-year-old, so I'm right in that boat a little above you guys. So they're running my life too. So, Rob, I want to say the Sabres have been, to say the least, have been through a rough stretch the last several years. What do the fans have to look forward to in the future with this club, in your opinion?
They got a lot. I think this is the first time that they've actually done it right. They get rid of all the high-priced help. They cleared it all out. They brought in the young kids. They've surrounded them with some good veteran players. and not only good players on the ice, good guys off the ice to teach them the right and the wrong and how to prepare and how to practice and all that kind of thing. So they're doing a good job of that. They're patient this time. Kevin Adams, I think, has done a really good job of, kind of just picking guys that fit into the design that they want to play. Donnie Granado's done a fantastic job communicating with these guys. They all love this guy, and he has a way of just getting his point across to them in a way that they can understand it and in turn go out and execute. It's not always perfect every night, but I think the big thing is they're competing every night. They may lose, but they're going to work from start to finish. And they may have up and downs, but for the most part, you see a very good effort. And we haven't seen that in a long time. For a long time there, it was just they'd hit a point in the game and it'd shut it off and it'd be over with, and you wouldn't know what you're going to get for the rest of the game. But right now they've a couple trades. They've got in some good young kids. You got Quinn playing really well in Roch. Krebs came in and he's doing really well. He's up here playing right now. Tage Thompson's made a huge transition to center this year. You got Darlene starting to mature into that player that you'd expect him to be. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, when he's played really well. So there's a lot on this team right now that fans could look at and go, okay, this future looks pretty bright. And that brightness hasn't been there in a while because they're always kind of chasing it in the past. Get rid of a young guy to bring in an older guy thinking it was going to be enough to put you over to get into the playoffs. And I think right now they're not even looking at the playoff picture. They're looking at development. And I don't think you would have even seen a lot of these kids this year playing up here if it wasn't COVID and all the injuries we've had to deal with, because their idea was leave these kids in Roch, let them grow together, let them learn how to play the game properly. And then when they're ready, bring them in. Don't force them into a situation they aren't ready for. And so it's still been good. They get in a couple games here and there, and then they get back down and keep working on what they have to do. But I'll tell you what, it's so much more exciting this year than it has been in the past. That people are catching on. People are realizing what they're doing is hopefully the right thing.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with you on that, Robbie. And like my son plays in Cincinnati, which is a ECHL affiliate. So they've been they lost a lot of players because of the pandemic and the taxi squad and all that. But I've watched a few of the Sabres games and Rochester as well. They got some good young talent. I mean, you mentioned a lot of them already, but Tage Thompson's another guy. The guys they got from Vegas are pretty good players. But I think you're right. They're doing it the right way. Kevin Adams is being patient, and development is a key to being successful down the road. And I like the fact that they're doing that. They're not pushing these guys in or moving them for older guys, thinking that that's going to get them to the playoffs.
Well, getting to the playoffs is nice, and it's good experience for them to get there when they get there. But you want to make sure they're ready when they get there. You just don't want to sell the farm to try to get into the playoffs and, survive a round maybe and be done. I think what they are now is looking long-term. And, I think going into every game, you're looking to win hockey games, but in the big picture, you're putting these kids in situations for them to develop and get that experience and kind of grow together. That never happened in the past. So, these guys, do they have pressure on them? Yeah, they got pressure on them to perform, but I think they've really done a good job of getting the point across to them here that, hey, don't ride the roller coaster. If we have a bad game, throw it out the window. We'll get back to work the next day, and we'll see what happens the next night. And I think the way Donnie Granado's done it has taken an awful lot of pressure off a lot of guys where they can just go out and play. And, there's nights so you're getting beat up pretty good, and you're not seeing heads hanging. You're not seeing a lack of effort. You're not seeing guys just kind of throw it in. They're just continue to work. They just keep doing their thing. And I think that's the most important thing moving down the road, that these guys are learning to do it the right way. Kyle Posto's done a fantastic job. Alex Tuck coming in the Vegas trade has been super, super for this group of kids. And, Mark Pezic on the back end brought him back after being here years ago. They've all put their finger into developing this group of guys, and Zemgus Girgensons, and not guys that you think are big names in the NHL, but they understand what the role is now. And they're at the point in their career where not just hang on, but their willingness to do it, I think, is the big thing. And I think that comes down to the message that coach and general manager and ownership's given to them that, you know, this is where we're at. This is what we want to do. And we want you to be a part of it.
You got to explain to me what the problem has been in the last 2 years with goalies. They've gone through 6 goalies already this year. Michael Hauser, who started in Cincinnati, won his game last night. Last year, he got to the NHL again, won his first game. I don't know. I don't know what you don't see that going on in any other organizations where they're going through that many goalies. Is it COVID or is it injuries?
No, it's all injury. I think Tokarski's the only one out right now with COVID, and he's over COVID, but he's just having symptoms that he can't get himself back into the condition he needs to be in. Hey, I look at it, Squid, that I remember the day when you played, I played goaltenders that play 60, 70 games a year, and, you know, they lean on them. I look at it sometimes that it's not the same type of guy anymore because they don't even allow them to play back-to-back in most cases anymore. I'm not saying it gets up. No, I'm not saying that. I think when a lot of the nights you're facing a ton of shots, there's an awful lot of traffic. Every team that we play now, it just seems like they're just bang to the net. There's always a big fight in front of the net all the time for the puck. There's a lot of traffic there, and these guys are getting dung up that way in most cases. And, you know, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen get hurt after, you know, facing 40 shots 3 or 4 nights in a row. So things like that kind of add to it. I think it's just a lot of bad luck. 2 years in a row now, we've used 6 different goaltenders.
Yeah.
Heck, we're only halfway through this year. And, you know, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is going to be a while. Subban's out with a shoulder still. Like I said, Tokarski, not sure, you know, how long he's going to be. Aaron Dell hurt the other night. It's just endless. But the good thing is when these guys have come in the last 2 years, they played well.
Yeah, they played well.
And last night, he played out of his mind, Hauser, and he won that hockey game for him. That could have been 4-0 in the first period last night for Ottawa, but he did a job, and for whatever reason, they can keep these guys rolling. And even Aaron Dell had a tough time at the beginning, and then he got himself in a groove and then got hurt. So they've got good production out of them when they've come in and played, and that's the amazing part. How deep they are in the depth chart, and they're still stepping in and making a difference.
So, Rob, in your opinion, why didn't the Jack Eichel situation work out overall?
Well, I think it just came down to, you know, Jack, you know, having the issue that he had, and the two sides couldn't decide and agree on what needed to happen. And, you know, it gets into those situations. Sometimes it starts getting personal one way or another, and it gets to a point where you might not find that common ground ever. And even if you do, it's still always going to hang there. And I think the Sabres realized that what was going on with Jack, where they were in their building and the direction they wanted to take. Hey, it might be the best thing. You move them, you get some players in. You know, in big picture too, it takes $10 million off your cap. You know, allows Jack to go get done what he wants to get done, move to a good team. And in turn, we have, you know, a couple young kids coming in, and financially it's a better situation for your team. So I think it just came down to a personal thing when they got it to a point where there was no coming back from it. And the best thing from it was just move on from it. And I think it took a lot of pressure off the guys too, because it was hanging over their heads all summer, the beginning of training camp. And you almost saw this team when the deal happened, it was like, oh, you know, they were able to breathe again. They could move on and just concentrate on what they had to do. So, hey, Jack's a hell of a player, and he's going to do well, you know, in his career. And, you know, you're going to look some nights when he's putting numbers up and, you know, sitting, why did we do it? But I think, you know, in the big picture, in the long run, you know, after getting rid of Sammy Reinhart and guys like that, Ristolainen, it was start fresh. And the only way to start fresh was, you know, moving them.
Yeah. Well, where I was going to go with that was the direction I really wanted to take that was almost unlike Connor McDavid. You see what he's going right through now in Ottawa. And outside of very minor success in the playoffs a number of years ago, they got through 2 rounds, and they've actually regressed since that point. Would it almost be fair if we could be in fantasy land and think players of those natures, and these are both exceptional players and generational type players, that if they came in a situation for Buffalo now, things might be different. Because if you take a look at a team like Chicago when they won, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Corey Crawford, Dustin Byfuglien were all drafted between 2001, 2004. Patrick King came along in 2007. Jonathan Tage, 2008. They won in 10. You know, Pittsburgh, Crosby came in 05, but within a year, he had Letang, he had Malkin, he had Jordan Stahl coming at him, and then he also had Marc-Andre Fleury in goal. I mean, even in Toronto, Austin Matthews arrives in 16, but Marner and Nylander are already there, and Riley, and they had traded for Frederik Andersen the same summer Matthews was drafted. Whereas when Eichel came in, all of a sudden, you know, there's this growth period, and you can see the same sort of scenario going with McDavid right now. So in a perfect world, it'd almost be that those kids came in today, it would elevate those teams to a higher level. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And I think, you know, in Jack's case, he came in and people expected him to save the world.
Exactly.
And, you know, carry the load of this hockey team and, you know, get it to where we needed to be, promised land and everything. And that was a lot on a young guy. And, you know, Jack was a great player, but he didn't have a supporting cast to help him out. And, you know, the emergence of Sammy Reinhart playing well with him. And, you know, you get Skinner thinking maybe he could play with him. And then that didn't work out. That I think he felt a tremendous amount of pressure. And then you make him a captain as a young player that, you know, I love Jack Eichel as a player, but I think Jack is going to excel as a player when he's not a number one guy on the team and he's got to carry the load. He can play with anybody and excel. But in our case, he had no supporting staff. And, you know, your weekend D, goaltending was suspect. And there was a lot of things along with, you know, multiple coaching changes, multiple general manager changes that a player like Jack, I can understand it where they got a time to perform. They got a time to win. And I just think that in his mind too, he's looking at the direction the team was going and it was going to be a few more years down the road. And, you know, did he feel he had enough time to do that?
Squid?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, you think of these young kids at 18 years old coming into the National Hockey League, and so much is expected of them. And I mean, that is a lot of pressure to carry as an 18-year-old kid coming in, knowing that they're counting on you to take this team to the promised land, so to speak. And, you know, but you don't have any help around you. I mean, that's got to be unbelievable pressure.
Yeah, I've never been in that situation, but I'm like, just the way the fans react and the way, you know, the team kind of sets you out there, the way the league, you know, builds you up, then expectations are going through the roof. And, you know what, back when you played, how many 18-year-old kids stepped into the game, or 19, you know, very few, maybe one or two a season might get a shot at it. And they allowed those kids to kind of gel and grow in the minors and come up when they're ready to go. It didn't matter how good they were. So I know the game is younger. There's a lot of younger kids in the game, and kids are stepping in, you know, after being drafted in the first round. The majority of them are stepping into lineups now, but you got to remember too, they're still kids. They're still mature level is not always there that you need to be to deal with media every day and the pressure of playing and performing and everyday life. It's hard sometimes, and some guys can handle it, some guys don't. And I think that's where it comes down to the support staff that you put around these guys is so important, because if you don't have it there early, then they could go in a direction that you might not ever get them back.
Well, then you couple that with a big contract on top of it and just adds to the pressure even more so for a young kid like that.
Yeah, sometimes I don't understand how kids want to go out, and I know it's all about the money and they want to make the big contract, and I think it's a status symbol for them and all that. But and then the other hand, they all want to go out and be the best player and be compared to the best in the game. But sometimes it's better off just to pull the reins back a little bit here and take that extra year or two before you kind of jump into that. Because as you know, that as soon as you sign those deals, man, that pressure, whatever you had before, it's going to be magnified by 10, because everybody's going to look at it, all the fan out there, and they might not understand in depth of, you know, everything you got to deal with and go through. That no, you're getting it paid. You better put those numbers up and carry the load. So That's tough. I would like to have experienced it once just to see how tough it was, just getting a big contract. But I always got the deal, whatever was left. Well, I always got the call. They always say, yeah, we want you back next year, but we got to sign all these guys. And then you get the call in about August when it was too late to go somewhere else. And they'd say, hey, we had to overpay this guy. We had to pay this guy. And this is what we got left. Will you come back? And what am I going to say? No. Sure. Yeah, no problem. Whatever. So, hey, I think that external pressure of having to perform.
One of the biggest reasons for that too, though, is the way the league is now. The PA has so much, and the players have so much more power now than we had none back in the 80s and early 90s until things started to change and there was salary disclosure. I mean, free agency was 32 years old when I was playing. I mean, how many guys made it to 32 and anybody wanted to sign them after that? Yeah. There was very, very few. And we didn't know what anybody in the league was making. So, I mean, when you have salary disclosure, it makes it so much easier. You just compare yourself, your agent does, to all the guys that are in the same category as you, and then that's what you're going to make. Pretty simple.
Nobody ever complained about it. It was just like, yeah, let's go. I can remember with the Knoxes here. The Knoxes, they were always involved in signing when they were around and invite you over to the country club and you'd golf for the day and he'd give you a sob story for 18 holes. And by the end, they'd give you a $5,000 raise and you'd go home excited and that would be the end of it. So I think it's great now because the guys are finally getting their just worth. And I love it when guys get paid, and are rewarded for what they do. And I just hope that they look back and which I don't know if they do, to think about all the guys that were locked out, guys that were on strike, and to fight for this type of thing, to put them in the situation they're in, to be allowed to get what they get. And, sometimes I look at it and I know there's some guys out there that just, they don't care what happened in the past and they just think they deserve it. And that's part sometimes frustrates me a little bit, but they need to sit back and really thank for what guys went through in the past to get them where they are and build the game.
Well, on that.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. And it's funny because there's a lot of guys. Well, this guy happened to be older than me, and I won't mention who it was, but it was a former player. And he said to me one day, he said, how in the hell can they pay that Connor McDavid $12.5 million? And I said, let me explain it to you like this. Probably a third of the teams in the league have 6,000 to 8,000 empty seats every game, with the exceptions of the games where McDavid or Ovechkin or Crosby or Matthews or someone like that is playing in their building. And I said, how many Connor McDavid sweaters have they sold, over time? I said, and not only that, I said, he might be the best player in the league for sure, top 3. So I said, he deserves it. And I'm glad. I can't say how happy I am that the players finally have the power that they have now and are getting paid what they should be getting paid.
And, the big thing, too, financially, they're being rewarded, too. And what better is now is the medical side of it, too. Because in the past, there was guys that were beat up so bad, the medical attention that was received was not good. And now sometimes you get frustrated with it, but you can understand it and respect it. When guys have issues now, they speak up. And they don't play when there's something wrong with them. Think how many times you were forced to play, because there was something wrong with you. And they're like, no, we're on the road. We're short. You got to play. You got to play. So now that doesn't happen. And that's the part, too, that probably more than the kids getting paid their just worth now, I'm probably more proud as an ex-player and having to go through a lot of that to know that they're getting that medical attention now that they deserve and should get. And hopefully down the road, they don't have to deal with a lot of things that guys did from the past.
Well, Rob, let's
to agree with you.
Let's see how you got to that stage. Let's go back to life back in Sterling, Ontario, playing for the local team. You eventually moved up to the Tier 2 Whitby club and then on to Cornwall. So why don't you take us through that whole period of your life to get your hockey career started?
It was great. You know, small town. We had like 1,200 people in Sterling at the time. We were double C. You know, you played every other little small town around you, and it was an amazing thing. You know, in our area, when you got to the playoffs, it didn't matter if you were novice, Adam, or all the way up to juvenile. When the playoffs started, the building was full of people, and it was because it was the thing to do. It was the night out, and you know, all the parents up there smoking and drinking in the stands, but it was just the thing to do. So it was so exciting, and the atmosphere was always so good when you played. Yeah, I got to a point. We went to the Ontario finals when I was a major bantam. That summer, I got invited to go to Trenton Bobcats Junior B. I ended up making the team, played there 1 year, went to Whitby the next year, Tier 2, made that team. That team was a tough year. I think we won like 9 games all season long. And we were a bunch of kids playing against men in Tier 2 there, and we got our butts kicked all the time. We won 9 games that year. We had 3 kids off that team make it to the NHL. It was me, Teppo Numminen, and Jan Ojanen. We all played together that year in Whitby, and 3 of us made it to the NHL from that. From there, got drafted to Cornwall. It was the greatest time, you know, getting down there, playing in the OHL. It was fantastic. It was a great city to play in, great people, and you know, I finished my 3rd year junior and I hadn't been drafted. I got drafted that summer in the 5th round here to Buffalo. It was kind of like, hey, this is kind of a topping on the cake. Go there for a training camp and a good way to end my hockey career. Fortunately, I got sent to Roch and signed a contract. And, you know, from that point on, a year later, I was playing in Buffalo. So it was amazing because I was the first kid kind of from our area. So the support you got was fantastic and everybody was behind you. And the great thing is everywhere I played, I've been close to home, whether it was Cornwall, people always down here. It was like, you know, they were always able to be a part of it. And I thought it was great. So, you know, for me, I had a dream career. And a lot of it had to do with having people from home being able to be a part of it. If you were out west or something, you know, you never would have had that chance. But I was always surrounded by people that were supportive, and you know, it was great just kind of give back to them.
Well, I was going to ask you, you know, the 318 penalty minutes, and you weren't certainly a kid fighting against men. You were certainly holding your own at some point, you know, Mass and those type of numbers. So you were certainly let them know who you were. Did you make a conscious decision that to be an aggressive player is how you were going to make it, or did it just sort of unfold in front of you as you went along?
No, I think when I made the step to Junior B, my first night at training camp for Junior B, some guy dropped the gloves with me and I didn't know what he was doing. And so you start, I guess that was the thing to do. And I don't even know what happened. And the guy picked me up from like the back of the neck and the back of my pants and like threw me headfirst into the boards. And now I can still see the guy, and I still see him sometimes when I go back home. And he's the little scrawniest, little skinniest piece of crap ever. And I look at him, I just shake my head and laugh. And I'm like, but that was kind of, because you were younger and not as big as those guys, you always had to fight your way through. And I think in Tier 2, it was men. Like, it wasn't you know, I was a 16-year-old kid then, and these guys were all overage junior players that Aurelian, Aurora, and all these teams, Richmond Hill, they always had, you know, they had these guys that they were playing there to win. That was the end of their junior careers, and they were, you know, they played hard, and you had to learn to play tough or you wouldn't survive. And then when he went to OHL, it just seemed like everybody, that was just the game you played. And I was not a fighter by any means. You know, defensive player, scored a few goals here and there, but that change in your game came when I went to Rochester. John Van Boxmeer was the coach then. And shortly after, when I got sent to Roch, he took me aside and said, hey, look, Buffalo is looking for this. This is what they want you to do. And I'm here to see if you think you're willing to do it or capable of doing it. And it took me about 2 seconds, and I'm like, show me how. And, you know, because you would have done anything you had to do to get to the NHL. And that year, I think I had 446 minutes in penalties. I had 46 fighting majors or something like that. I got my ass kicked 43 of the 46 fights I got in, but you kind of learned the craft, and you just kind of, and Boxy was good with it. Boxy was not a fighter by any means, but he really did a good job of teaching you when not to, using it as momentum, all that kind of thing. So he taught me a ton to prepare me for when I, took the next step to Buffalo. And, from that point on, it was Rick Dudley was a coach then, and he was awesome because he had played a hard game too. And, he took from what Boxy taught me to the next level, and, he taught you to survive. And I think a lot of guys go into the game and I trust me, I didn't want to have to play that way, but it was kind of to get there. That's what you had to do. And then once you got there, if you didn't keep it up, you wouldn't have been around. And I think that's the big thing with a lot of guys that had to play that role. A lot of guys couldn't keep it up and keep doing it and be successful with it. They always started to think they were something else at one point. And, for me, John Muckler was the one that kind of said he'd always kind of have a way of grounding you. And, you would think, okay, I got this going. I got a couple goals in the last few games I'm going to play. And he'd always be taking you aside and saying, don't forget. That's not what you're here for. Don't forget, it's to play this game. So, I got good direction along the way. And, hopefully I can look at myself and think I was smart enough as a young enough guy to understand it and respect the opportunity I was getting. And, years later you're done. And it's like, yeah, you look back and go, would you change anything? And it'd be absolutely not, because I might not ever have had the opportunity to play if, you didn't take that suggestion and that advice, back when you were in Rush.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of Rick Dudley, I mean, I thought he was a great coach. I got to play for him. I think you were there. Were you there his first year?
Yeah.
I believe you were, yeah. And that year, I think we finished second or third overall in the entire league. Rick did a great job, I thought. And then, of course, things got sour when Muckler came in, and he was going to take over for Jerry Meehan the following year. And then he fired Duds, I think, 20 games into the season or something, and then he took over. And that wasn't the best thing for me. I ended up in the press box for 3.5 months. But anyway, it's I'm not saying John Muckler wasn't a good coach or a good teacher. He certainly was. Obviously, he's got, great things that he's done as a coach in the National Hockey League. But for me, it wasn't the right fit at the time. But you know what? Hey, I went to Rochester at the deadline, and we made it to the semifinals. I had a blast down there. It was a great place to play. I know what you're talking about when you said it was a great place to play. The fans were great in Rochester. I loved it.
Yeah, I remember John Muckler coming in the first night after he took over as coach. And he literally walks in the room and he says, hey, I treat superstars like superstars. The rest of you just be happy you're here. And we're kind of looking around going, I ain't a superstar, so I better shut my mouth here and just kind of go along with it. But I ended up having a great relationship with John Muckler down the road. And, he ended up bringing me to Ottawa at the end, because, more for helping guys, Chris Neal and those guys off the ice than on the ice. So, yeah, I ended up having a great relationship with him. It was a lot of fun. I learned an awful lot from him. But I'll tell you, I look back, Rick, and I look at Rick Dudley as one of the most intelligent hockey people that I think I've met along the way, because he just looks at the game a different way. He's able to understand players. He communicated really well. And he pushed guys. Like, you're in the weight room working out, and he's out there. If you're lifting 100 pounds, he's lifting 200, trying to show you up, going, if I can do it, why can't you do it, type thing. So, yeah, he was a great motivator, and he was a good man to kind of teach you what it's all about.
Well, the funny thing about Duds, though, was he had that temper. And I remember that game, I believe we were playing LA, and we were up by like 3 or 4 goals. And you remember how we used to always give it to the linesmen and the referees. Every time they skated by the bench, he'd be yapping at them all the time. Ron Asseltine was the linesman. He's right in front of our bench at the blue line. LA comes in about 3 feet offside. He goes like this. They score a goal, and Duds goes nuts. He rips his papers in half. He starts banging on the glass. The fans are scattering. They're getting out of there. I thought, holy cow. Oh, that's pretty crazy. But
yeah, I remember one night on the plane coming home from somewhere, and we didn't fly very nice planes. and he ripped the back seat right out of the plane. We thought the back end of the plane had fallen off, and it was Duds ripping the seat out, throwing it in the back. But hey, you know what? He had passion, and he took things serious, and I totally appreciate, you know, what he brought to the game and the way he coached and the way he, you know, took the time to help each guy. You know, he cared for the guys. Yeah. He cared what, you know, how each individual guy did. It wasn't all about, you know, winning and losing. He wanted guys to get better, and he wanted to pass on what he knew to them.
Well, I think with your the start of your career, Rob, the split season with with Rochester and Buffalo, people could probably win a beer on this one quite often if they would ask your first highlight as a Sabre, what it would be. Now, coming with 446 penalty minutes coming into Rochester and like averaging almost 300 a year, you would suggest it to be a fight, but it happened to be your first goal on your first shift and on your first shot.
Yeah, I got called up. We played the night before in Roch, and Boxy called me in and said, "Hey, you're going to Pittsburgh. You're playing tomorrow night." And I'm like, "Shut up," you know, like not believing it. Finally convinced me that it was true, and I flew out the next morning to meet the team in Pittsburgh, and I was the most nervous person in the world. And I can remember going out for warm up. And in warm-up, I'm looking around, and I ran into Dean Kennedy. And you remember how big and strong Dean was. And he looks at me, he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be here type thing. And he didn't play me early, and all of a sudden he gave me the shift, and I got out. I was playing left wing, and I remember it was Scotty O'Neill, and he hit me with a pass going down the wing, and I took a slap shot, and I had 0 slap shot. I sucked at a slap shot. And it goes 5-hole on Tom Barrasso. And he didn't know it went in. I didn't know it went in. And finally, it was like, it went in. And I'm like, oh, my God. And I think that night I had a goal and assist +3. And statistically wise, it was the best game I ever had in the NHL. And it was like, I'm like, fighting this. I ain't fighting nothing. And, you know, it was like, woo. You know, the next day, Dougie Bodger's carrying you to the bus because they took you out all night. And it was just the greatest experience ever. And at that point, it was like, if they sent me back to Roch right now, I'm the happiest guy in the world. And I wouldn't care if I ever got another call up because, you know, you kind of did it and you were there. And it was amazing. And luckily for me too, my last shift in hockey, in NHL, exactly. I scored as well in Toronto. And Jacques Martin, I was in Ottawa, and Jacques Martin did not like me one bit. When I went to Ottawa the first time, he calls me in the office and he says to me, he goes, "Hey, I just want to let you know that you're not here because I wanted you here. You're here because John Muckler wanted you here." And I'm like, you know, I'm 35, 36 at the time. So, normally that might have crushed somebody. And I'm like, "All right, Jack, no problem, man." It's like, and just kind of walked out of his office. And I scored that night in Toronto, and I came back to the bench, and I never moved an inch the rest of the time, and he would never dress me. And that was just him and I. That was just the relationship we had. For whatever reason, he didn't like me. And there was like 3-4 games left in the year too that year, and they meant nothing. And he refused to dress me. It was the last practice of the last regular season game before playoffs. And, Jacques always called everybody into the circle, and the guys were always very intimidated of Jacques. And I said, "Hey, Jacques, before you start," he goes, "Yes, Rob Ray." He always called you Rob Ray. And he always made you play D in practice. Shane Nettie and I played D together all the time. And I go, "Jacques, I'm telling you, if you put me in the lineup tonight, I promise you I will not score." And he looked at me and he turned red and he goes, "You're not playing." And he goes, "Practice is over." And he freaked out and he took off the ice and away he went. And that was it. So I don't know.
Well, those are, Rob, that's exactly what we were talking about earlier is that, coaches back in those days, they could just say, "I don't like this guy," and sit you in the press box for months and collecting mothballs up there. Whereas, like I said, the players now, they have power. And I love it. I think it's great because if you're not getting treated properly in one place, you can easily ask for a trade. Your agent can get involved, and you will get moved eventually. So I think it's great the way the game has evolved and the way that the power that the players have. I think it's fabulous.
Think of how many guys over the years, Rick, that got buried in the minors because somebody didn't like them. and they were fantastic players, and they could play on, majority of the teams in the NHL and be highly productive, but somebody didn't like them, and they just get buried because, you didn't move guys like that all the time. You just kind of sent them away, and it was kind of like, yeah, I get in the last laugh. And there were so many guys just rotted in the minors because
hundreds and hundreds of guys never got a shot in the NHL that were like the best players in the American Hockey League. And back in those days, nowadays, you go there, if you're one of the best players, you're going to get a chance in the National Hockey League. There's no question.
And that's the way it should be because, there's so many guys there that can help other organizations. And I don't know what is in the past, kind of an old man's club. You don't touch mine, I don't touch yours type thing. And, go from there. So that's why when you do get the chance, for most guys, you just sit there, keep your mouth shut and do whatever you're told, just, so you don't become one of those statistics.
When you think about the Montreal Canadiens in the 70s, Halifax, their farm team in the American Hockey League, they had probably 8 to 10 guys that could have played on half the NHL teams in the NHL at that point, after the expansion in 67 and again in 72, I think it was. But they couldn't move.
No,
they couldn't get out of there because Montreal owned them, and they weren't going to give them up. And that doesn't happen nowadays. If you're that good, you're either going to get called up to your parent club that you're with, or you're going to get traded.
Yep.
And I think it's great.
Well, Rob, I want to go to little Buffalo, the small town. Certainly had some rivalries throughout those years. You guys had some really good teams. Squid, you're on a couple of those good teams too. But some of these rivalries with Quebec, Montreal, Toronto, Boston, speak to that over the years, and maybe even leading up to 1992, that incident with the fan who stupidly jumped on the ice and certainly paid for it. Squid, you weren't there for that game. Are you in the press box?
No, I was probably in the press box.
I wanted you to talk about some of the rivalries you guys had with Quebec, Montreal, Toronto, Boston. For a small town, you guys certainly were the scorn of a lot of those teams and had some real battles, including the one with that rambunctious fan the one night in Quebec.
Oh, yeah, that Quebec thing was a strange situation. There was a 5-on-5 fight out on the ice, and Herb Lagan had ran over Clint Malarchuk, so they're going at it. And we're sitting there, and we're kind of watching what's going on in the ice, and then we notice this guy climb up behind on the glass. And I remember John Mucker going, I'll get him. And I got a picture of him holding Kenny Sutton's stick, trying to poke the guy back. The guy jumps into the bench. We grab on him, throw him on the ice. He jumps right out off the ice, comes running right back at where I was again. And I had him by the head on the boards. I think I hit him 18 times before the cops came out and they started jumping on him and pulling him down. And, when I was done, I had a ball of hair in my hand. The cops are getting the guy off the ice. There's bullets laying all over the ice because they had fallen out of the guy's quick loader or something. And they're out there picking bullets up off the ice. And you look down at the Quebec bench and they're just kind of looking at you with your jaw hanging going, what the hell is going on over there? And it was amazing. And come to find out, they did an interview with the guy, time down the road. And he was like, I was protesting the violence in sports. And I'm like, you dumbass, do something different. I don't know what you did. But, the funniest thing was one time I said to Gordy Donnelly, I said, is that the craziest thing you ever saw? And he goes, no. He said, same building. He said, I was playing there one time and somebody had brought in piglets in a sack and threw them over the boards at one time. The pigs are running all over the ice and they're crapping all over. And he goes, that's the craziest thing I ever saw. So, but yeah, we had some good ones. Like with Boston here, Boston was the nemesis of Buffalo for the longest time. Until Nate Ace Gill actually, beating him in the first round, that it kind of, broke a jinx for this team and organization. And from then on, it's been pretty good. But I'll tell you what, when you were playing those teams like Hartford and Montreal and Boston, it seemed like 10 times a year, the hatred for them was off the charts and the fans as well. And I'll tell you, when the Bruins, like Bruce Shoebottom and all those guys with the Bruins, when they'd come in, when I first got here, it was like, I wasn't ready for that, and I didn't know what to expect and all this. But, you know, the people didn't even care about the game. They were just like, you know, they were waiting for something to happen. But, you know, but that's when it was great. It was like the fan interest was so in it. They hated every player on the other teams. They knew all the players. And, you know, now you play a team a couple times a year. It's kind of hard to get that hatred unless you get into a playoff scenario that, you know, may happen multiple times. So, yeah, it was a pretty crazy time there that, you know, the people just still talk about it. They still talk about when, like, O'Reilly and that going through the boards, and there's Shoney fighting in the Zamboni way. And, you know, that kind of stuff just never leaves these people, and they just thrive on it and they love it. And, you know, now with Toronto coming in, it's, you know, for us, it was great because at the beginning you'd play them twice a year, once, maybe twice. And that was it. So you had that one game a year that you could do. But then when they moved to our side, it was like, that's the best thing that ever could have happened, because, you know, that fire was there, and people in the stands, and, you know, being close enough that there's so many of the Leaf fans and our fans, it seemed like it was 50-50 at times, and you just went at it, and on and off the ice. So, you know, it's tough to explain to some guys now, and I think people still try to go, oh, there's a Toronto-Buffalo rivalry and all that, and I'm like, not even close. This is nothing. This is, you're playing it 4 or 5 times a year, but that's not a rivalry. That's because you have to play them around the schedule. Before, it was like you playing for weeks for it, and nobody cared about anything other than, you know, how crazy it was going to get.
Now, did you and Tie Domi have a running feud? Because it seemed like every time you two played, you two both had each other on the dance card for some reason.
I think we fought 13 times in the NHL. I played against Ty. He was in Peterborough. I was in Cornwall. The 1 year I was in the minors. I played against him there as well. And it just seemed to happen all the time. And I respect the heck out of Ty, because he was a gamer. I was a gamer. We both knew what our jobs were. And we both know that, you know, at times when, you know, he needed to give his team a boost, then I'd be a willing combatant. And the other way, he'd oblige too. If I, you know, was in a situation that I'd tried to get something going, he'd always oblige. And yeah, it was awesome. And you know what? There was times when we'd play Toronto, and, you know, you get bombarded in the morning going, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? If it didn't happen in the game, they were asking you why it didn't happen. But, you know, for Ty and I, we got drafted at the same time. We had the same agent at the same time. Rolly Thompson. I can remember getting picked up to go to the draft. It was Rolly driving. Danny Dow was in the front seat. Ty was in the back seat. They come to my house. I jump in the back all excited, and I look over, and there's Ty. And it's about a 3-hour drive from my house to Montreal. Ty never shut up the whole time, and I just sat there, and I'm just looking at him going, when am I going to hit him? And it was like, and we ended up rooming together. We got in a little scuffle in the room. And, you know, the next day we both get drafted. We had a great time, and, you know, they dropped me off back home the next following the draft, and it was like, see you later. And the next time we saw each other, I think the first fight we had in the NHL was when he was with Winnipeg. And from that point on, we just went at it. But do we ever hate each other? I don't think we ever hated each other. We knew that we had a role and tried to do it as good as possible and entertain along the way. And, you know, we've got to a point now where I've been around Ty quite a bit, and, you know, he's fun to be around, and he's a good guy, and I enjoy being around him. And yeah, I think you had to be that way when you did it all the time. You had to kind of have a little bit of a hate for each other, but you still respected each other. And I know we sat down like 3 years ago now, and we were on the ice surface at the rink, and they dropped the Jumbotron down, and Andrew Peters kind of narrated it, and we played all 13 fights we had in the NHL, him and I. Play a fight, we talk about it. Play the next one, we talk about it. And it was awesome. It was a great thing. And actually, we ended up winning an Emmy for it, actually, for the production we did. So it was cool, and I'm glad I got a chance to know him, because, you know, just to have a chance to talk about what he had to deal with, what I had to deal with along the way, playing a similar role, that you gain a ton of respect. And I'll tell you what, you know, talk to him periodically now, and, you know, it's great. I'm glad that, you know, you've kind of got a chance to know somebody else and see what they're really like, and not have to hate them. You know, I've gone through the NHL, and I can't count how many guys that I've gone up to since I was done playing, and it's like, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry for something I said, something I did, or whatever along the way. I'm sorry. And It's a good feeling to be able to say it, and then you don't have to worry about it. I can remember the first time walking into the airport in Toronto when we were going out east for an alumni thing, and Shane Corson and Darcy Tucker were sitting together, and I'm like, this is not good. So I got enough courage up, and I sacked up, and I walked over, and I said to both of them, I said, hey, I just want to apologize right now for anything I said or did over the years, and I just want to come out and say that the two of them were awesome too. It was like 10 minutes later, you're laughing your ass off, telling stories, and it was great. But there's still only one guy out there that I haven't had the chance to apologize to, but he just doesn't want it yet. So maybe when he gets a little older.
So I want to go back to the old odd. And I remember as a player going into the odd, it was a difficult place to play. Then when I got there, but I always wondered why that puck, when it was shot in on the right side, would always ricochet out into the high slot. And then, of course, when I get traded there, I realized that Porky, the assistant equipment guy or whatever he was, would put his foot on the door and push it out so the puck would hit and go right out into the slot. And I got to tell you, I think about 3 times it happened where I knew exactly where to go and knew that Porky was going to be there, and the puck ended up on my stick. Next thing you know, it's in the net. And that was unbelievable. But as an opposing player, it pissed us off all the time.
Oh, I did. And you always seen guys get mad, yelling at the refs, they can't do, what's this all about? But it was a tool, and if you were smart enough to use it, and if Porky wasn't stuffing his face with food at the time and realized what was going on, and he got his foot on that door just right to pop that puck out, that led to a lot of guys scoring goals, man, because and then it would be funny because you'd look, when you'd switch ends, the opposition would try doing the same thing, and the puck would just wrap around the wall, and they'd be like, how the hell is it popping out for you, and it's not popping out for us? And then come to find out, all it is a little push on the door, and it would pop it. I mean, it would pop it perfectly right out in that slot area.
Oh, yeah.
And the positioning of the door. And there was a lot of guys benefited, from that. And, there was always, Porky had a big smile on his face. Got another assist tonight, boys. Got another assist tonight. So he always kept track of how many assists that he figured he got in the NHL. And I don't know. I'd hate to look back. He probably got more assists in the NHL by doing that than I did.
Rob, for the listeners out there that aren't aware, you have the distinction of having a rule named after you.
Yeah.
Maybe walk us through how that all came about and why it is as such.
Well, you know what? It was a time when, you're learning to play that game, and there was a lot of experimenting going on with big jerseys and Velcro with your arms coming off, and, just silicone, tight jerseys. Guys were trying everything, and not so much in the NHL as they were in the minors when that first year I was down there. So you had a great chance to experiment. And I didn't like a tight jersey. I liked it loose, so I always wore a goalie cut jersey. And the one night the jersey came off, and the elbow pads fell off, and it was like you got the advantage. And it was like Jim Pizzatelli, we used to call him the fight doctor because he loved fighting, and he was our trainer. And so he would always work with it too and try to come up with ideas. So it got to the point where you cut all the straps off your shoulder pads, and you just took little pieces of Velcro and put it on the pads of your shoulders, and then it hooked to the jersey. So as soon as you kind of just tuck your arms in and somebody grab on and they'd give you a tug, everything, shoulder pads, jersey, and everything was gone. And, guys, there was some nights when you were fighting guys and all of a sudden the jersey come off, they're standing there with this hand and you could just see them go, oh shit. It's like, cause they knew they were in trouble, and then, that was the upper hand. I think enough complaining from players and general managers and coaches over the years, it kind of built to a point where they felt they needed to do something about it. And for me, it wasn't so bad because at that point in my career, I wasn't having the same body as I used to have. So, to keep it covered up was probably the better thing anyways. But I went from having nothing hold on to my first fight with having to tie down was an exhibition with Tie here. And the little bugger got my shirt over my head and then pulled down on it. And my head was in my sleeve. And I could see him, and he was punching me, and I was in a bad spot. And from that point on, I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work. So I put a snap on the front of my jersey and snapped it to the front of my pants and the back of my pants. And at that point, they couldn't get it off. They couldn't lift it up. They couldn't, anything over your head. And it worked well as well. And I'm glad that I had to kind of switch back to it later in my career when you were kind of comfortable doing it, because if you had to do it earlier, it might not have had the same effect. But, by that time you were confident doing what you had to do. And by that time, there was a lot of guys in the game that, you weren't too worried about, that you had to fight, not the same way it was the first few years. So yeah, it went from one extreme to another. And, now you look back and it's kind of cool because you always get somebody coming up, oh, the Rob Ray rule. And, what do you think? And I think it's cool. My kid now, he's, like I said, he's 12 and he's into hockey, and, once in a while it'll pop up and he just laughs and shakes his head, because he sees it all. He's got all the stuff here that, I used along the way, and he understands it. And, he always will walk away when somebody says something, they go, yeah, it really worked, didn't it, Dad? Or, he was always had something smart to say. And it's awesome. It's great. You kind of indirectly left your stamp on the game, I guess.
Squid.
So you mentioned Jim Pizzatelli, the fight doctor, but he loved fighting, but he was a great trainer. He was a guy that probably saved Clint Malarchuk's life, but he also made robes for the tough guys.
Yeah.
Talk about the robes.
Oh, I'll tell you what, the robes were a big thing. He started giving out robes to the tough guys, and then he would give them to guys that made the All-Star game and that along the way too. And but you would have ceremonies. Like, you would do a whole ceremony, and there was always something different. The guys would always plan it and present the robe, and it was a big thing. And if somebody knew you got a robe, there was a lot of guys be pissed off because they haven't got one, and they always were trying to do whatever they could do to get one. And but he was very, very specific and selective on who he gave them to. I can remember the day we gave it to Charlie Huddy. And we were in LA at the practice rink, and we presented Charlie Huddy with a robe. And Charlie had a really good understanding of what it was all about. He literally cried when he got it. And we had a whole thing there after practice one day, and we had, I don't know if I'm allowed to say everything that we had there, that, kind of celebrating it, but a whole ordeal. And, here's a guy that had won multiple Stanley Cups, and, it brought him to tears, us giving him the robe, because of the way he played and the way he was appreciated there, and how much the guys liked him. So it was a pretty cool thing. Mine's here too. I get it's yellow and gold, and it's got Razor 32 on the back and sugar on it, and he did it up right.
Well, speaking of appreciation,
I never got one.
Well, you should have got one for the press box. Now, speaking of appreciation, Rob, you had a tough job, no question. Almost thankless to a point. Did you ever have a moment during your career where a vet or a certain teammate, they spoke to you about the appreciation you had for the role that you carried for 14 years you carried with the Buffalo Sabres? I mean, let's face it, a lot of smaller guys can play a foot taller when they know you're circling the ice behind them.
Yeah, you know what? We had great guys, and we had guys that understood the role and respected it. And, whether going out and drawing a penalty, the extra penalty or something, and they get a chance to be on the ice for a power play and, help them statistically wise and all that. I had Dale Hawerchuk. I've had guys, but when Dale Hawerchuk came up to me one night, and, sometimes I with Dale, it was always kind of walked a fine line sometimes, because he'd always has something to say, positive or negative. And I'm like, uh-oh, what's he going to say? And, because he was trying to help you, he's coaching you, and there was things you would do in a game that would say, Razor, you got to do this different. And he came up one night and he just kind of stuck out his hand. He said, hey, I want to thank you. He says, I got 2 points tonight, and I don't know how many over the years from you drawing the penalty and making me feel comfortable on the ice that, I just want to let you know, I appreciate what you're doing. And, that happened a few times with guys, and it made it all worthwhile, because some nights you're doing that job and you think you're on an island, and guys looking at you like, what the hell are you doing type thing. But when guys like that understood it, respected it, and were willing to let you know how they felt, that was the ultimate, reward or pat in the back or whatever it may be. It meant a ton. It meant a ton.
Squid?
Yeah, no, I think I don't think there's any question that back in those days, the guys that scored the goals or got the points and everything always appreciated what those guys that did that terrible job, that they had to go out and fight all the time, were appreciated by their teammates. I don't think there was any question of that. Maybe the players didn't tell them that often enough. Probably myself, I was probably guilty of not, relaying that. I always appreciated it. I always understood why they were there, what they were doing it for, and how it helped me. But maybe I didn't let them know that. And but they were always appreciated.
I want to talk about now. We just got a few minutes left. We want to again thank you for joining us for so long here. But I would like to ask you about moving behind the mic and working with the iconic Rick Jeanneret.
Yep.
And maybe the difference coming from a player to going from in front of the mic to behind it.
Well, I never had aspirations of doing it. I never even thought about doing it. And it was like the day before the first game after the year I had retired. And Larry Quinn had called me and he said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And I'm like, "How do you do it?" And he goes, "Don't worry about it. Just show up tomorrow night at the rink and you and Danny will do it." So I started working with Danny, pre-games and in between periods. And Danny was awesome because he took the time to help you out and, and trying to hold your hand along the way until you got comfortable. And I can remember when I had to make the move from being like pregame and in between periods to being the third guy with RJ and Harry. And it was like, what am I doing here? Like, with these two guys, Harry Neal, I grew up listening to him on Hockey Night in Canada my whole life. And then RJ getting to know him here and how, a legend he is here. And then there was myself. And I was scared to death most nights to say anything. And RJ was tough at the beginning sometimes too, because he would, if you said the wrong thing, as soon as you went to commercial, he'd be like, "What the hell are you saying that for?" He was on you a little bit. So he always kept you on your toes. And it was such an opportunity to work with those guys and learn from those guys. There was nothing better than going on the road and sitting at some little dive bar that Harry and RJ always went to, when they were on the road, and sitting there listening to them tell stories and, talk to you and make you feel a part of it. And it's awesome. And it's the greatest job you can have because you have no pressure. You know the game, the players. You go in and you just talk hockey every night as you're standing there. So yeah, it's the best job anybody can have. And RJ and I get along so well. We talk, every day almost, and not just hockey. It's always life. It's what's going on. And, we have a great relationship and a friendship that I cherish. And, he's a guy that is older than my father, I think. And I have a relationship with him that I wasn't always able to have with my father because he wasn't around all the time. So it was great. And I still to this day, when we get a chance to work together, he's only doing 20 some games this year, but you respect it. And I love getting him going and just sitting back and listening to him because, when the play's on, shut up. You just let him do his thing. When the whistle goes until the puck drops, that's your time to be talking. And, that's not like that a lot of times now. There's a lot of interaction amongst color and play-by-play. And with RJ, you just let him go because you never want to step on his toes or take something that happened on the ice away because you were blabbing about something else. And, yeah, it's great. And it's going to be it's great that we're seeing him. His name's going in the rafters and they're recognizing him for everything that he's done. Because I'll tell you, he's in the Sabres organization. He's if Gilbert and RJ are the two guys in this organization that are the most recognized, popular guys, in this town. And I'm just so happy that not happy that he's retiring, but I'm happy that he's getting the chance to be recognized in the way he should.
Yeah, I noticed that recently, and I thought that was fantastic. Rick's a great guy. He's from St. Catharines, actually, just down the road from where I live. And I got to know him a lot over the years. And you know what? He's been there. He's been an icon there for so long is so nice to see that they're going to honor him with that. I think it's fantastic. Well deserved.
Yep. Well, listen, Squid, Rob, time is always our enemy. We've run out of time. We want to thank you so much for joining us today. Some great stories, some great insights to your life as a Sabre, and now following the game. We just want to send a one word. We know what the Buffalo fans are going through from Toronto ourselves. We've gone through the hell for a number of years. Patience, I would say, is the one word they have to have moving forward. A little patience. And all they got to do is look at the team down the street, the Bills, and what's happened with them just by letting it play itself out. And I think you're right, and I think they're on the right track.
Yeah, I think they are. They're doing it right this time. And, yeah, we want to get back to, where we were. And, I think they're taking the proper steps right now to get there someday.
Squid, final comment?
I think they are. I believe they are, too. I think they're doing a great job. They got a lot of really good young talent in the minors and in Buffalo. And I think it's just a matter of time, because they're going to have a high draft pick probably this year as well. And they'll get another good player. And, the next thing you have 5 seasons in a row where you pick in the top 10. Well, you're going to have 5 pretty damn good hockey players 3 or 4 years down the road. And I think this team is only going to get better and better.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. There's some young kids looking forward to Owen Power coming in next year and, playing with Dudley on the back end. And, yeah, goaltending depth looks good for this hockey team right now. These young kids that are playing, the kid in Michigan, Levi, that's playing too, I think New Hampshire. So, we've got some strength to work with now. And, it's not as thin as it used to be. So now you got the depth, you got some competitiveness against with these kids to try to battle for spots, and that's what you want to see.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
well, listen, Robbie,
absolutely.
Thanks so much. Best of luck moving forward. And thanks for joining us today.
No problem, guys.